So yeah, Johnny Dunleavy and Ronan Finn were here. We're going to talk about Ollie Horgan in a while. We've had some good chats off air about that, and we're going to. I mean, that's obviously very, as I said earlier, it's very much fresh in everyone's mind, a beloved figure. But first of all, we'll speak about the football last night. I know Ronan, you were in the Premier Sports studio. Watching Shelbourne, but keeping an eye maybe on your former club, Shamrock Rovers, towards the end. I think Johnny, you saw a bit of both games, so I don't know. Like, what's the takeaway for you, Ronan? I mean, it's pretty momentous.
Yeah, you could say it was, biggest day in League of Ireland history was the last night. Two teams, qualifying for group stage. Don't remember this even ever being a conversation. We always wanted one. Maybe over the last 5-6 years, this becomes a realisation, especially then with the Conference League. Even at that, I think getting two in it was never really, going to be a question, because just the champions path was always the way. For another club to do it outside that was always going to be difficult. And I think the only team that could have done it was Rovers, just because of, the power of the squad, as good as they are, and the experience they've had. So I think it's great that Shells were champions, Pat, and then Rovers doing it. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny, like, you played with the Cork City team that was going sort of head to head with Dundalk. With Ronan's Dundalk for a while, there was a little bit of an overlap. Any previous, are we all?
Not really. It's just a good job the tables between us here.
Yeah. The odd cup final, or maybe a couple of those events. But I mean, in that era, like, I think at that Dundalk side, it was one and done in Europe. Sometimes the Bate in 2015, and with Cork City as well, there was no parachute available. So it's a different vibe in Europe now, but still, it doesn't take away from the achievement. But it is a new era we're talking about.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, like, the teams that we were involved in, myself and Ron, they were, brilliant times and brilliant memories. And that Dundalk team that he was a part of is probably one that's really underestimated when people look back on it. I mean, I always tell people they were so good that Zenit St. Petersburg came to play the Montala and defended against them. That's how good that Dundalk team were. But as a Cork City team, we had some brilliant nights in Europe. Probably didn't achieve maybe as much as we could have. But as you say, last night was just an unbelievable night for both teams. And I mean, like, I got to see the second half of the Shamrock Rovers game. It was the first half, actually, of the Shelbourne game. And the atmosphere in Tala last night, and the atmosphere after the game, and I have to say, it's as animated and emotional as I've ever seen Stephen Bradley.
Yeah.
And I think just what it meant to him, it really showed what it meant to him. And I was just so impressed by both teams last night. They thoroughly deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, Ronan, you've worked with Stephen Bradley so closely. You were a big part of the Shamrock Rovers story. I think you've spoken about Josh being diagnosed, and your parent yourself. You've seen close at hand probably how that affected Stephen Bradley in that time, and it must be nice to see him come out the other end of it now.
Yeah, so I mean, it just puts everything into perspective, that like the news that Stephen and his family got, this week will outweigh anything that was done last night.
Yeah.
But then doing them both together in a week, the unbelievable news of Josh, and then going through. I think I read today in the paper. I think Josh said to Stephen, before he left the house last night, his dad, "You make sure you win. I want to be on that pitch celebrating." And then Stephen, he's done it in the past. He might have said stuff to us, especially I think on the lead up to one of the leagues. He was like, "You make sure Josh is on the pitch. We use lifting that trophy. That's what he's asked me to do. Carry it out." So there's always been a close bond between the whole situation there, and the players and the manager are so close that it was unbelievable how Stephen kept the distance in a way as well. He never really made it affect, or we never really picked up on it if he was having a tough day, or if we didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, because it was just how he managed it was just incredible. And then you see the emotion last night, you see the news, as I said, that will outweigh anything as a parent. Your kids are the most important things, but then also then to follow through with last night, what a moment for the whole family.
Yeah, and like the evolution of that team, I mean, this is the thing, you were there when the Flora Tallinn game in 2021, there would have been question marks like around that time maybe about Rovers in Europe. This would have been a thing. There was a couple of first leg European ties where they got away from you a bit with sort of late concessions and ties. And what struck me across the last 2 weeks is just how comfortable this team looks now. That actually a lot of the apprehension and nerves last night was the fans or even some of the officials I was speaking to. But when the game started, you didn't feel that on the pitch.
And I'd probably go back to the Conference League. I think for me it changed then last year in the group stage because like a lot of the time when you watch League of Ireland teams playing against European opposites, even us, even as Johnny said, you know, going back to the Dundalk days, we were always felt, you know, the underdog. You always had to outperform the opposition. You always needed an 8 out of 10 from your whole team and nobody make a mistake. Rovers now, I think, are just very comfortable in Europe now. You know, they'll go away to Santa Clara last week and dominate the ball. Last week, you know, watched a lot of the Rovers game, was watching a little bit of the Shells game. But what I noticed the first 20 minutes before Santa Clara scored was how comfortable Rovers were. Going away in Europe, again, Johnny, you'll notice, is so difficult to win. You normally are under the pump, your back's to the wall a little bit. Remember playing, like, again, you go back to Dundalk or going to your tough European fixtures like Ferencváros, you're up against it, even as far back as Belgrade, you know. You're going, this is inevitably going to be a tough night. Rovers have kind of changed that narrative and they're going away and still imposing themselves on the game. I think that's come from an experience, but it's also just come from maybe the group, as you said, has evolved and players like Dylan Watts, and they're just comfortable now in this environment, not being overawed by any occasion. And I think that was so evident last night, but I think for the main one was the group stages last year.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, like, you are the bridge. Like, you were there at the start, the first group stage in 2011, beating Partizan Belgrade away. I was there that night, and I remember, I think did everyone end up back in a hotel watching the replay of the game and Patrick Sullivan's goal and all of that. And there would have been some older players in that group. I know you were probably one of the young lads. There would have been some older players, and there was a sense of, I can't believe that this is happening in my lifetime. And you flip it around now to the likes of Pico and Lee Grace and you know, these lads, they're heading into, like, they're going to have 30, 40 appearances at this level.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think about what 2011 was just so, we're tourists here. That was almost that sort of sense around it.
And it was, like, listen, we were the game at home against Belgrade, we gave us a chance. You know what I mean? You were going over there with hope, you know, more than anything. It was always going to be a big monumental task for us to go to Belgrade and get a result. I think that narrative's changed now. I think now, obviously with the Conference League, you know, it's a different setup. You know, there's another competition. But yeah, it's just now there's a bit of an expectancy. You know, as I said, there's now 2 teams. That's where we've come to. We've come from the hope of one. Now, you know, it's nearly bare minimum you're expecting, you know, a team to be knocking on the door every single year, whether that's Champions Paths or now, as Rovers have proved, you can go the other route as well. Yeah.
With your sort of defenders hat on, Johnny, like you watched the second half of Rovers last night. What were you thinking watching? Were you thinking looking okay, or was there nervy moments? What was your sense of it from your perspective?
No, I mean, as you said there, probably the biggest credit that you could give to Rovers players and Stephen Bradley really was how comfortable they looked in the occasion. And as you said, from my sense anyway, it felt like a big occasion for everyone around the pitch, but the lads on it seemed really, really controlled. And that was probably, like, in the second half, at no point really did Santa Clara impose themselves on the game, I didn't feel. Rovers picked their moments when to press them really well. They made it very, very difficult for them. Santa Clara only beat their press once that I can remember in the second half when they found Serginho around the halfway line. But outside of that, Ed McGinty had to make, in fairness, 2 brilliant saves. But against a team of that quality, that's probably the bare minimum you'd expect from your keeper. It's hard for me to give Ed that credit now because I used to call him chocolate wrists at Sligo. But it was like a phenomenal, 2 phenomenal saves really. But as I say, in general, in the half, Rovers really could have scored. They had a couple of half chances from set pieces, and as I say, to me anyway, it felt comfortable. It felt inevitable that they would get through, and that's a massive credit to them.
Yeah, as I said, you know Ed a while from your time at Sligo Rovers, and a lot of people felt as this maybe one of the final pieces of the jigsaw for Rovers. That position had been a bit of a problem, but I mean, he sort of rose to the challenge last night, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm not one bit surprised, to be honest. Like, he's first of all, a brilliant fella and character, I'd say, and there's no doubt that'll be evident in the dressing room. He'll be a good crack around the place as well. But in terms of his work ethic, like his physique, I mean, you don't really realise until you're beside him how big he is and how imposing that he is. Technically, very good as well. Like, I remember when we were in Sligo, he broke his finger or his thumb at one stage. And he was going so well in five-a-sides in training that genuinely Liam Buckley had said to the lads, I actually might put Ed on the bench in an outfield jersey. That is how well he was going in training. So you can ask him about that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been integral, really, I would say, to Shamrock Rovers this year. And, it's not a surprise to me anyway.
With Shelbourne, I think maybe there was that little niggling sense of, well, they haven't done it before. Could they wobble? Even against Linfield last month, they got a little bit hairy up there in the second leg of the Champions League tie. But you sent me a message, I think it was a half-time last night, going, Shells were excellent here. I mean, what was your sense? Were you watching that game last night thinking, Shells going to be able to handle this? Or what was your feeling going into it?
I suppose pre-game I was kind of maybe it was listening to people outside or reading things outside, and it was going to be tough for Shelbourne going up there, and that that Linfield would be a different Linfield outfit, and this kind of rhetoric or whatever. But watching the game, Shelbourne were so in control. I mean, Ronan was watching the whole thing in studio, but I thought. I suppose I should say that I felt Linfield were pretty tepid. Never really got to the pitch of the game, particularly in the first half. Never laid a glove on Shelbourne. But from Joey O'Brien's point of view, that must have been a pleasure to watch from the sideline, because their intensity with and without the ball was just phenomenal. The fluidity in their movement, their passing, picking the right moments to go forward. I personally, now, for a European performance, going away to a ground like that, I thought they were exceptional from what I saw anyway.
Yeah. I mean, Ronan, for you, I remember when you played with Joey O'Brien at Rovers, I think someone compared you to an old married couple at some stage, the two of you, because you were right wing back and he was right centre half, and that would have been when you played AC Milan, right? That would have been that time.
Yeah, for a couple of years, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So you go back a long way. What's it like for you to see Joey stepping into big shoes and everything that came with that, and now he's going to be a manager in the league phase of a competition? Yeah,
I suppose from day one since I met Joe, you always knew he was going to be a manager. Just probably, probably it's not. He's in terms of players that I've played with, he'd be the most just knowledgeable. Especially in a defensive third, he's brilliant. I suppose when you're playing as a kid now, and you're not naturally taught maybe the defensive side of the game. Joe obviously, has a career in England, played under Sam Allardyce, just learns maybe, the defensive traits that just not really taught at grassroots here. So then he was, all of a sudden he's coming back here and he's just giving even the senior lads within the dressing room just pointers, whatever.
Yeah.
Defending set pieces, I remember coming in at Rovers and just slightly making a couple of changes. But no, in terms of just the type of person, delighted from, always knew he was going to, step into management. And when Damien made the call, I was trying to keep him at Rovers at that stage,
Really?
Yeah, obviously, listen, Joe could still play, absolutely. There was, don't get me wrong, he was getting older, but, he's still a fantastic footballer. I was, lovely technique, could read the game as good as anybody. And I suppose it's you take the opportunity, and gone under Damien, and I know they still continue to have a brilliant relationship, and probably learned, in a brilliant apprenticeship almost. Damien stepped away, and I think the transition has been seamless. He knows the group inside out. So from Shelbourne point of view, it was a natural progression almost.
What did you think that day when you heard that Duff was gone? Did you think, this will be Joey? Would that cross your mind?
Yeah,
to be him.
I felt it just had to be him. In terms of young, ambitious managers within the country, there was no need to look anywhere else. He knows the group so well. It's not like they needed massive change at Shelbourne. I think that the results had dipped off, but they were league champions. Still in a good position within the league. Damien obviously had his reasons for stepping away, but for Joe, I think it was just a natural progression to step into full-time first-team management.
How do you think they'll approach it? Because I think there's no doubt, when Rovers go into the groups this year, they've been there before, they've been there last year. Shells, I was listening to Harry Wood last night, being interviewed, and even his tone was like, hopefully we get some glamour ties. I feel like I wouldn't hear that from a Rovers player now, because they're thinking progression, but it's only
natural.
Sam Bone was tweeting about, something about Mateta or whatever. Is it just natural that Shell's first time
like it
out?
is, I get in, and I obviously I'm not saying the likes of Luke and people like that behind the scenes, and even the management staff, they're probably not, they want to progress. As a player, I remember, being in the airport after Belgrade, and the reality is we all wanted Tottenham. We all were looking at like the potential of it, and the news came in. We were all in the lounge waiting to go home, waiting to board the plane, and news broke through that we'd got Tottenham, and it was just like, brilliant. That was it. I can completely relate to Harry Wood in that situation. He's 23. He's just come off a brilliant night. You naturally just want a big club. Then this is why you work so hard. This is why you win the league. This is why you go through the rounds after round to get to this place. So you can forgive him absolutely if he's asking for a glamour tie.
Yeah, I mean those Rovers draws. Did you watch them together? Like I think in 2022, you watched them, or was it more? We're a little bit more.
To be honest, the one that has really stood out for me,
or Dundalk, of course, as well.
The one is the Belgrade one. Just because it was forced. Because as you said earlier, probably was it expected? Probably not. So that was the one that I really remember. Can't really remember the others, to be honest. Probably remember Dundalk slightly, just then perhaps, but no. It was the Rovers original 2011. I remember what it was for that.
Yeah. So just in case people haven't heard the full draws, I don't think I've given it all the fixtures. And it is to be confirmed in terms of the orders of where they're going to be played and so on. But Shamrock Rovers have got Shakhtar Donetsk at home, Sparta Prague away, Celje from Slovenia at home, AEK Athens away, Hamrun Spartans from Malta at home. This is just a brilliant competition with all these random teams thrown into it. And Breidablik from Iceland away. It's a bit of a reunion tour vibe for some of these Rovers games. And then Shelbourne, definitely like the headline grabbing games, maybe with AZ Alkmaar away, the tri-powered aspect, Crystal Palace at home. They're also playing Celje. Albert Riera, who annoyed Rovers the last time out by seemingly being very arrogant, according to Stephen Bradley. Then they played Drita from Kosovo at home, Shendika from North Macedonia away, and Häcken from Sweden at home. I don't know, Johnny, like what stands out to you from those draws? It's a bit of a mixed bag, really, isn't it?
It is a bit of a mixed bag for both teams, really. Probably, I objectively looking at it earlier, I probably thought that Shamrock Rovers had actually got the more difficult group. But it's just, I suppose there's pros and cons for both teams, and as Ronan says there, like the excitement now for the Shelbourne boys, it's the first time for anything. It's almost a free shot to them to some degree, whereas Shamrock Rovers are probably expecting a bit more of themselves now, and to see can they progress that little bit further in Europe, and it's just brilliant. It's brilliant for the League of Ireland. I
mean, there's possibly one person that isn't brilliant for Ronan, I have to think here. Because Sean Boyd earlier in the campaign, he made some reference to Ronan Finn not being sure about Shelbourne getting through because of a little record that you held. I mean, we met recently. I say recently.
I've only heard about this story today. No,
the year before, the end of 2023? Was it? I think we met in Killester because Ronan Finn, 63 League of Ireland European appearances. We sat and we went through every single one. Every game, you remembered lots from some games. The odd one,
some none. Yeah,
some not at all. 60, and I definitely remember thinking, oh, this record is not going to be touched for a while. And then your old pal, Sean Gannon, front and centre in the celebrations. I think he's 62 now, is it? Is he? Do you know?
I don't know.
He knows well.
Oh, I don't.
There's definitely a sheet at home. There's definitely a little sheet at home.
Listen, regardless of if it's Sean or if it's going to be Pico at somebody at Rovers, I think it's going to be gone. I think that's.
Did you think? Is that surprising to you that it's vulnerable this quickly?
I remember kind of Brad's saying to me in the dressing room, like maybe in Europe, he's like, he's made some reference like, come on, let's make it, like uncatchable or something like that, almost like a half a joke. But obviously now it's just with the Shells, with Sean, some career, like everywhere he goes, the success follows. And now even with Rovers lads, I mean, between Pico, between League, there's going to be a lot of them that are, I think I'll be in the rear view mirror for,
Can we nail him on starts or something? Like how many he didn't start all those games at Rovers.
I'll get it out of the bedroom.
Ronan Finn, top European starts. Get that on your LinkedIn or whatever. Most starts in European competition. But I mean, there's always there's always a loser somewhere. There's always a loser from it somewhere. But
I actually think the draw for Shells is very good.
Do you? Yeah.
I do. Like, I mean, I was looking at it this afternoon, and the ones that stood out to me were AZ, just maybe because I played there.
Yeah.
It's a lovely place, lovely stadium, great, just a lovely, you know what I mean? You go to certain European cities or certain European grounds and like you remember them, and that was one I remember. Obviously have Driga,
Crossman
champions. Yeah, I know they played Stoya in the round previous. Like I think they were 2 up the end of Blues, 3-2. Like they'll be good, but I mean, I think they're at home that game.
Yeah.
We played Scoopy from Macedonia. Obviously a good side. I think they have champions from
Shendike,
champions from Macedonia. So I mean, like you're talking about levels. I think there's points there to be got for Shells. I think their home fixtures, like you've got the one probably Crystal Palace at home, regardless of where you play Crystal Palace.
Where do you want to play them? Do you want to play them
in Dublin?
Yeah, you want to play them in Dublin, but do you want to play them at the end? Like, do you hope with some of these better teams that they're through? Like, there's all this sort of, or do you want them early for the buzz?
At the end, there was different setup back then, but we played the Tala game. I think it was the 15th of December.
Harry Kane scored, yeah.
So that was it. It was kind of a bit of a, you're nearly loving that one at the start. Your first one, because at that stage we hadn't accumulated any points. Maybe the buzz had worn off. So the Palace game at home will be a bumper crowd. And the reality is, whatever chance you have of beating them in Dublin, you have no chance of beating them in London, really.
Yeah.
So you maybe you do this as a commercial. You grow as big as you can. You sell it. A 3-season, 3-game in tally. You can brand it around that, and having the game at Crystal Palace, will help that. So they'll drive the numbers up in that sense. And then for Rovers, I think it's probably a bit of a harder one.
You think?
Yeah, I think there's.
You got Athens was the worst one they could have gotten their one in the from pot 4, but there's tough ties in there.
Slavia Prague, good side. I think they're going well. Shakhtar Donetsk, that will be in Tala. That will be a great occasion. They're obviously a top European side. I mean, regular Champions League. So and Celje obviously have both Irish teams, so it'll be an interesting one again for Celje coming back to Tala. Obviously Rovers done them last year, but then Celje ended up going on and having a good European campaign themselves last year. So it was very exciting. There's some interesting ties.
Yeah, no, they are. They're good problems to have, I guess. Those ones, even if they are. Some difficult games. Now, look, I mean, there's obviously another massive story, and we referred to it earlier on, is the passing of Ollie Horgan yesterday, which is, as much as people knew he was unwell, it's still pretty shocking. The sort of to see the news. Just 57 years of age. Probably better known as a Finn Harps manager, although his most recent job was as assistant manager of Galway United, and prior to that, also a teacher. I've heard from former students of his yesterday, for 30 years. He was teaching as well, and a legendary figure in the amateur football scene as well before he moved into the League of Ireland with Finn Harps. And Johnny, you're from Ballybuffet, you're from Finn Harps country. You went back to play for a year under Ollie. I don't know where you start with a character like Ollie Horgan, but what's your reaction to the news? Yeah,
I suppose sometimes it's very hard to know what to say or how to say it or how to talk about someone, but I suppose just probably the outpouring since the news that he passed away sort of shows the esteem that he was held in Ireland. And I think I heard someone on the radio talk about him this morning and sort of said that he was the epitome of what the League of Ireland is in terms of his passion, his big heart, but also that he was a bit of crack. The stories that you have. And I mean, I spoke to a few lads that I would have played with in Finn Harps the year that I was up there, and the lads have no bother saying it. There's been tears since they heard, and it just shows the effect that he had on people, even in such a short space of time. I mean, you can't really imagine the work that he did at Finn Harps. He was Finn Harps manager for 7 years, and it's no exaggeration to say that what he did with Finn Harps and the squads that he assembled was a miracle. And the players that he brought in would not have been at Finn Harps if Ollie Horgan wasn't the manager, and that is just a fact. I mean, I'm sure you'll speak to people over the next few weeks. You'll speak to David Webster about how Ollie signed him, driving down to Dublin to sign him, and even my own story. I suppose I would have known Ollie from when I was maybe 15 years of age. Yeah. Or so he was managing Fanage United in Donegal, and you would have heard about Ollie Horgan. You would have seen him walking around. He was very recognisable. There's no question about it. But he was always known as this brilliant manager of Fanad United in the Ulster Senior League, and then obviously he took over at Finn Harps, and me being a Finn Harps fan, sure I would have followed Harps religiously. Never would have only known him really superficially or talked to him superficially. Let's say when we were playing against him for Cork or things like that. When I left Cork, then I was moving back up closer to home really, and first person on the phone before I'd even spoken to anyone was Ollie Horgan. You know, it was unbelievable. He rang me and I met him, and he'd asked me to sign for Finn Harps, and I didn't sign for Harps on that occasion. But one story that I always tell about him, his work ethic and dedication, to going to see matches, going to see players, was absolutely unheard of, unbelievable. So it just so happened that year we were playing. First game of the season was Sligo Rovers at home to away at Finn Harps, I should say. So about 6 weeks before the season started, Sligo Rovers had their first pre-season friendly, and we were playing Cabinteely in Abbottstown behind closed doors, or so we thought. So we got up to Abbottstown anyway, and the only pitch that was floodlit was the front pitch in Abbottstown. So we had actually brought 2 11s with us, 1 11 for the first half, 1 for the second half. So we sat into the dugouts. Liam Buckley was the manager of Sligo at the time. And we're sitting, all the back pitches in Abbottstown were pitch black. There was no one round. Anyone watching the game was at the near fences. So I sat into the dugout, and about 5 minutes into the game, I just looked at the far side of the pitch, and underneath one of the floodlights, you could just see someone leaning on the floodlight. And I have an awful funny feeling, and I know who that might be, you know. So I just said to one of the young boys that was sitting beside me, I said, you wouldn't do me an awful favour, pretend you're going to get a football at the far side of the pitch there, just see who that is. So he walked around, and he came back, and sure enough, Ollie Horgan, you know, behind closed doors games. And I mean, it was unbelievable, and that was, but not uncommon for him. You know, people say they saw him at games that you wouldn't believe, army matches, you know, things like this. He missed nothing, and look, an incredible character, unbelievable person.
What was he like to play for then?
He was a lot more tactically astute than people probably gave him credit for. Knew football inside out, and I suppose the biggest, what could you say? One of the best things that you could say about him is no one liked to play against his teams anyway, that's for sure. I had all but retired probably when he rang me. I was playing for Sligo, and I had a knee operation in December and pretty much thought I was finished. And the surgeon, actually Ray Moran in Dublin here, he said to me, well, if you want to play, you can play. It's actually, you can probably play a bit more. So I ended up on the phone to Ollie again somehow. And I was living in Kilkenny at the time, and drove up to Ballybuffet, or up to Letterkenny, I should say, to train a few times. And I mean, he knew well what he was doing, like me being a Finn Harps fan and everything, how I was never going to be able to turn down the opportunity, So I went up anyway, and at whatever point, it might have been 6 weeks actually into the season, maybe 8 weeks, he said, what about signing? I said, sure, let's do it, So it was a Tuesday. Finn Harps were playing Longford away on the Tuesday, and this is another real Ollie Horgan special, let's say. They were playing Longford away on the Tuesday, and I went into Finn Park. I remember going into Finn Park, and the secretary was there, and I said, Kathy, I'm supposed to sign my contract today. And she said, oh, right, yeah. She said, how much are you supposed to get? And I said, I honestly, it doesn't matter. I said, just put it there, I'll sign it. You put out whatever you want after. So that was fine, and we signed it and walked out. So I've been training with Harps for about 6 weeks, maybe played no games, hadn't played a game since the previous season. Tuesday night they went out, Boydie was playing, Boydie got injured, and someone else got injured, one of the back four, actually might have been Shane McElhinney, I think, got injured as well. So Thursday we go into training, and we train Thursday night, get a phone call from Ollie about 8 o'clock that night. Can you start tomorrow? We were playing Pats at home. Now no one even knew that I had signed for Finn Harps. No one. There was nothing in the papers. He says, well, there's nothing at all. And the first that anyone knew about it was 45 minutes before the match when the two teams were named or whatever. Here was me stepping in at left back. So he had his own way, and I mean, he made you feel, when you were playing for him, he made you feel 10 feet tall. You know what I mean? You can't really say any more than that.
Yeah. I'll never forget the time being at one of the end of year awards dinners, and you have this image of Ollie, and he has that wild appearance and this manic sideline presence. But then it was you heard someone beautifully playing the piano. Yeah. What's this? And suddenly it's Ollie Horgan sitting down, classical music enthusiast, apparently big into his composers, playing the piano.
Oh yeah, he used to love his Beethoven as far as you know. Like, and another thing about him probably that you wouldn't see away from football. He's absolutely brilliant company.
Yeah,
Brilliant company. Like, you know, like I don't drink myself now, but if I was a man to have a pint, there wouldn't be many in front of him in the queue. Like,
yeah,
you know, for me to have a pint with. Just brilliant company, brilliant stories. Like, and you know, he had his own wit as well. You know, some of the one-liners that he came out with. Like, I think that year at Harps, as I say, we were going quite well for at least the first half of the season, maybe. And someone had said, "Ollie, geez, you're going well. You'll be pushing for Europe." And he said, "The closest we'll get to Europe is a plane to Lourdes."
yeah.
You know, like stuff like that, or
Quick way.
really quick, exactly, really quick with it. Like, would you have many memories of playing against, say, his teams?
Yeah, as you said, it was always a tough play to go Finn Harps regardless. But then, you know, throw Ollie into the mix, and he'd always play it down. You know, he'd always he'd mind games. He'd always I'd speak to Ollie. I suppose one of the things that I didn't, you know, never played under him. But you know, even in the heat of the moment or in the heat of a game, you could be liable to say anything to anybody. You know, he was probably the one man that I would never, ever, even if the ball went over the touchline and he kicked the ball away, I didn't, you know, he's just the one man that I would never have said I'd never bit at. He kicked away, I said, "No problem, Ollie. You know, I'll tell you know, it's you." And it was probably the one manager, you know, you played against, you know, as the years go on, you play against former managers, but after the game, you generally, sometimes you forget, you don't always go over to the manager. You'd probably always be the one manager I would always sound out to go over and shake his hand and just have one or two lines, you know, that was it, best luck, safe home, you know, whatever. But he was the one man. I don't know why. He was just, you know, I've always played League of Ireland and never played abroad, so he was just a League of Ireland legend. He was just like, as he did epitomise what I played for 20 years. So this was his life. This was his background. Never, you know, strayed from that. And he was just a good character, you know, just a really good man. And as just used to his mind games were always great. That was, you know, you'd see him before, he'd like, "We having a chance, Rowan." You know, you know, we having a chance here. And I'd be like going, "Yeah, like you're. I know what you're doing here. You're trying to disarm us, whatever." We'd always have a game plan, and just Boydie, you know, would just tell us some funny stories, and it would only enhance, you know, what you would think of him. Like, he's just a real character. Probably just a manager. Yeah, you'd want to play for. You know, you'd do anything for if he was your boss, and you know, he told you to do something, you would just do it.
Yeah, I think Sean Boyd had a forfeit one time at Shells of having to ring Ollie and leave him and tell him how much he missed him. But I think he was lucky that it went straight to voicemail. But I think he still had to leave. The voicemail. But it was fitting with the RT. I think the RT 6-1. Someone, I didn't see this, but someone said that apparently the little clip of Ollie they showed was him berating a referee in the sidelines. It was almost like, you know, that caught that moment in time. Or what was that other great story as well, that the Finn Harps players are celebrating after winning the playoff. I think that had they beaten Limerick maybe, and the dressing room is going wild, the music is playing, you know, and Ollie comes in and says, you know, "Enjoy it, lads, because you'll be going straight back down next year."
Yeah, and I think that was one, because obviously Willie O'Connor, our manager at UCD, worked under him. And there would be an element of, because Boydie would tell us, you know, if Finn Harps were to beat Rovers, you know, if we were playing and they got a result against us, you know, they'd be all buzzing in the dressing room. And Holly come in and goes, "Lads, you think that hard, but we're going to Cork next week. You can forget about this."
Yeah.
You know, it's all like, you know, so you just bring people back down to earth very fast. And I think the lads all just bought into that. You know, that was his nature.
I don't think we know half of the tales as well. Some of the recruitment stories popping up all over places, I think, and you'd hear these tales of him sort of he'd be pulling in players from everywhere, and I just don't know how he signed half of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was unreal. Like, I suppose in terms of recruitment as well, same myself, I played for that year. I'd always said I'd play for 1 year for Finn Harps. I just really wanted to. It was always my club, and I kind of always hoped to finish up there, really. So at the end of that season, Ollie rang me and he said, "Will you do 1 more year for me?" I said, "I don't know, Ollie." I said, "I'm not sure. Like, the body's, you know, suffering a little bit and stuff." And he said, 1 more year." He said, "I won't ask you again. That's it. I won't ask you again." So I said, "Look, Ollie," I said, "I'll have to speak to Sarah." And he said, "I'll speak to her." Yeah. And I said, "Right." He said, I'll be down next week. 100%, I'll be down next week." So the following week, I don't know what night of the week it was, myself and Sarah were in the house in Kilkenny, and he rings me. He says, I'm on the way down. I'm meeting Basti and Heary in Dublin, and I'll be down. I should be with you by about 8 o'clock. And sure enough, he was in the armchair in my front room that night at 8 o'clock, telling Sarah the plans for the following year. No, ultimately didn't end up playing for them that year, but just nothing would surprise you. You know what I mean? He would have done anything like.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of warmth in the stories, and I think you mentioned some of the old Finn Harps lads are going down on Sunday night, going to stay over and tell some stories. So I'd imagine, there's a lot of happy memories of Ollie Horgan, but also just, I mean, it's hard to believe, like, he's a very young man as well.
Yeah,
so.
no, very much so. And I suppose it's important too to say, like, you know, condolences to his family and everyone that knows him as well. It's no doubt a very tough time for them. Yeah,
Shelbourne Galway, rightly so, has been called off on Sunday as a sort of a mark of respect, and that's going to be refixed next week. So, yeah, that's Ollie Horgan. I suppose that's a wrap, lads. Thanks for coming in. A great night for the clubs in Europe, but obviously a really sort of bittersweet feeling around the week for everyone who knows Ollie Horgan and loves the game here.